Right. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Wholesome greetings. Happy to have you here for this important conversation. And as we get started, we will do a check-in with everyone, and that will be led by Ade to check in and connect with ourselves before we start this section. Over to you, Ade.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone, as you come into this space. My name is Ade Adeniji, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. So as you arrive, I'm going to invite you to, just notice how you're sitting. If you need to adjust your position, I'm going to invite you to make sure that you are sitting comfortably with both feet on the ground. And if you're okay with it, I'd like you to just lower your gaze or close your eyes if you want to, but just take your eyes away from the screen. And I'm going to invite you to connect with your body in whatever way feels most comfortable. And what I mean by that is simply notice, how is your body this morning as you arrive in this space? What's going on in your body? So you might want to start with your feet, moving up, or another part of your body. Just do a check-in and see how it is. Like, really connect with it. For some of you, it might be the first time you're doing this today, to really pay attention to your body. And as you're doing that, I'd like you to, gently start to move different parts of your body. It might be your shoulders, your fingers, your toes, your waist. Simply start to feel the vitality in that body. Do it at your own pace, at a gentle, compassionate pace. It's not a competition. You're not getting anywhere or leaving anywhere. You're simply allowing your body to come into this space. And then very gently start to bring that to a pause. And then now bring your attention to your breath. Notice as you're breathing in and breathing out. You don't need to change your rhythm. Simply notice as the air goes in and as it comes out, either through your mouth or your nose. Just simply notice. That's all you're doing, noticing. And now I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath and breathe out with a sound, with a sigh. So deep breath. And do that one more time. A deep breath, filling in the lungs. And then breathing out again. And then very gently open your eyes, if you have them closed. And now the invitation is to have a look around the room or the space that you're in. Just have a look around and allow yourself to welcome in this space that you're in. Notice what's on the walls, the ceiling. If you've got tables, bookcases, just simply looking. All you're doing is welcoming in the space as you fully arrive here. And then letting that go. And then now in chat, I'm going to invite you to type in 1 or 2 words that captures how you're feeling as you arrive in this space. Like 1 or 2 words to capture how you're feeling. And all emotions are welcome here. The high ones, the low ones, the pleasant ones, the unpleasant ones. All is welcome. So 1 or 2 words in chat to capture how you're feeling as you arrive in this space. Thank you. for those who have typed in. So we have nervous and curious, relax, tense and inspired. And I just noticed I sent mine as a private message. So mine was excited and tense. Anyone else, how you're feeling as you arrive in this space? Knowing that all is welcome here. Thank you. Present and curious, aware and relaxed. Thank you to those of you who put those words in. And as we go through our conversation today, the invitation is to, simply notice how those emotions are relaxed and curious. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Pass back to you, Toyin.
Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue this conversation as I formally welcome you to our post-HSVP conversation. And for some of you who do not know what that means, we've just had a successful Healing Soulidarity Virtual Project that was concluded last month, where we invited people from all over spaces across Africa or wherever they are in the world to share with us what they do, what healing means to them in what we call Let's Talk Healing question, and what they do, for healing being the second thing that we asked. And the third thing we asked is how they are working in healing solidarity with other people as a community. This was for us to see how healing justice is spreading among Africans and how we are transforming intergenerational and collective trauma through intentional and holistic healing. And it was an amazing project. And the two speakers that we have today were part of the people who participated in this conversation. So we're bringing them today to continue this conversation by unpacking some crucial things around what healing means to us, looking at it from the perspective of why interpersonal healing is crucial in this age of polycrisis. And I'm happy to welcome Ade and Ayomide to lead this conversation with us. In that lens, I want to once again mention my name, which I think I've skipped. I'm Toyin Ajao. I'm a restorative healing researcher and practitioner. I'm the founder of ìAfrika, which platform we are now that is hosting this conversation. Also, within this space, I would love to be known as Moon Goddess or called Moon Goddess. I would love our speakers to give us just a short introduction about themselves. I know I have your bio, but I really want to know how you want to show up in this space today and what is that key thing you want to share about your contribution to the world and the impact you're making and what you're doing at this present moment. Over to Ayomide, then Ade.
Thank you very much, Moon Goddess. I'm really excited to be in this space with you. We've worked, I think, for the past 2 years around conversations, intergenerational conversations, and environment and mental health. And I'm really happy to be here to further the conversation in another dimension, really. My name is Ayomide Olude, and I am a Yoruba girl I currently from Nigeria, but I currently live in Lagos. I'm from Afrika, the exact history of Yoruba land, but I currently live in Lagos. And I work as a project manager for the Anxiety Africa project, which also intersects with my personal interest around environment and how it impacts our mental health, and even wider than that, how we impact holistic well-being for everybody. And I'm really happy to, be able to work in this space and be in this conversation. Thank you. Over to you, Ade.
Thank you, Ayomide. Lovely to meet you. So I am Adewale Adeniji. I'm also a Yoruba of Yoruba heritage. I'm based in the Netherlands, actually. That's where I am right now. And in terms of the work that I do, I work as a coach, a consultant, a group facilitator, and I'm very passionate about healing. And I bring that into all the work that I do, regardless of the area that I'm working in. So it could be organizationally, I bring healing in. And when I think about healing, I think about alignment, bringing people, working with people to bring them in alignment with their thinking, their feelings, and their behavior, how they're showing up in the world, which is really, really powerful. I also bring in my own lived experience. I'm very passionate about healing my own stuff as well. And I think that the more that I do my own healing work, the more I'm able to show up as a grounded practitioner in the work that I do. And there was one other thing I was going to share, but that's gone out of my mind, so it might come back later on. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to invite everybody to kind of share what they feel comfortable telling us about who they are, as well as how they are impacting their world in terms of this healing conversation that we're having. You can type it into the chat room, or you can just raise up your hands to be called. We don't mind that, because we really want to make this as interactive as possible. So type away or say something to us. Yeah. Okay. So I want to repeat. I'm still waiting for that to happen. And once I see anybody indicating to speak or to type in the chat room, I'm going to honor that and call you forth. I'm going to be keenly looking out for that. Yeah. So I would love to quickly repeat the general question for our topic today. Why is intergenerational and collective healing crucial in this age of polycrisis? And we're thinking about polycrisis in the sense of how a lot of traumas are still getting magnified in our culture, in our system. Ayomide talked about climate change in the way she's doing our work. Recently, we see how that impact is far-reaching in our minds and hearts. So we'd love to have these conversations. We'd love to see how we are embodying healing in the space that's become more polarized, even more traumatic for us. And I would love to pose the first set of questions to our speakers by asking how you think intergenerational trauma is shaping our present day realities. I want to hear from you. What's in your healing practices, intrapersonally and interpersonally, and as well as the community yourself, is playing out. So I will begin with Ade.
Thank you. Thanks, Toyin. I think a good place to start actually is looking at the definition of intergenerational trauma, because there might be some people here who don't fully know what that means. And even if they do, many of us come to the table with different definitions of what it means. And there was a definition I came across in a book by a practitioner called Marielle Bouquet, who wrote the book Break the Cycle. And I'm just going to put the definition in chat, actually. And she says, intergenerational trauma is a wounding of the soul. It's a multi-level emotional injury that impacts a person's mind, their thoughts and emotions, body, the way they carry suffering physically, and spirit, a disruption in their inner knowing and connection with others. And I really like that definition. And one of the things that it doesn't really touch on is the difference between intergenerational trauma and transgenerational trauma, which I think we're going to be bringing into our conversation. And even though sometimes both are used interchangeably, intergenerational trauma very often is focusing on the trauma through our family of origin line, while transgenerational trauma looks at the societal and the collective. So they are interconnected. But I just think that as part of our conversation, when we're talking about, intergenerational trauma, we're bringing in the transgenerational trauma, which is it's all collective. It's all collective trauma. And I think that the starting point for me certainly is having that conversation about it and just checking in, like, how is it showing up in my day-to-day life? How is it showing up with the people that I'm interacting with? And I think a big part of it is normalizing the conversation, because for all of us, regardless of where we are located in the world, regardless of our history, we all carry scars, we all carry bruises, and we all carry wounds. I mean, to be alive is to have scars, bruises, and wounds. And the first part for me is really about acknowledging that and talking about that. Because growing up, this wasn't a conversation that I saw, my parents or their parents have. There was just this thing around, it's all in the past, don't look at it, just focus on the present and the future. And I think normalizing that conversation for me is a really important starting point. I'll pause there and bring in Ayomide.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Ade. And looking at my notes, I was going to also start with like the definition of trauma, because I think that's very important for us to know what trauma really means. And I like, your definition of a soul injury. I also have a wound here, but not, it doesn't include soul. And I think that makes it really poignant. It's a soul wound, and it's really deep, and manifest in different ways when they are not solved. So yeah, I think I will just do a brief of the type of trauma, because I have some examples along those lines, so it just makes it easy for people to understand what I mean. Like for example, individual traumas, I have an example of, and I'm going to speak from an environmental perspective because that's what I work around. So imagine experiencing a flood, for example, and you lose your house, or you lose other valuables, or even the fact, because I live in Nigeria, even the fact of experiencing that flood and having to, probably go to work, and then you are struggling to get public transport, which is a big thing here in Nigeria when it rains and all of that. It can be really traumatic for some people, from the people I've spoken with in the line of my work. So trauma is on a spectrum. You might not see a big deal in getting your house getting flooded and you losing stuff, and you are able to relocate, but then another person loses like their life earnings because of that flood, so it causes PTSD and long lasting trauma for that particular person. And that also brings me to the fact that sometimes trauma can be avoided when there are resources available for this particular thing. So and then intergenerational trauma, like Ade has said, comes with the family, your familial line, and there is even the epigenetics of it. I've been reading a book recently that says it doesn't start with you. I can't remember who wrote that book. And it just shows that trauma, family trauma also happens on a microcellular level in the genomes and all of that, and the genes, and can be passed to children, especially when parents have not addressed that trauma before, having children. So it's easier passed in that way. And then collective trauma is just population level trauma, something that everybody experiences. For example, flooding, for like regional flooding or heat waves, natural disasters that have affect entire communities. These are ways of collective trauma. So everybody in that community has that experience. For example, in Nigeria, in Ayetoro community, there was an ocean surge in Ondo State, and they lost about 90% of the houses in that community. So that's collective trauma because it's not just one family that is experiencing that, but it's like entire community, and that is also going to be passed across generations of people who come from that community because of the things that their family, their parents, and whoever has experienced. And historic trauma is collective trauma, but also bigger. So it impacts like entire races and culture. For example, colonialism in Nigeria is an historic trauma that we still hold on to right now. War that is going on in different places in the world, we can see that that's historic trauma. And that all these types of trauma really just intersect. So when we are talking about trauma in the Polycrisis, we are not just talking about personal trauma or even intergenerational trauma. We are talking about different forms of trauma, just as the Polycrisis reflects different circumstances like climate change and economic inequalities all happening at the same time. This trauma also now converge at the same time and shapes people's behaviors, and it shapes people's beliefs, and it shapes social structures, and it is passed down through generations, and it affects mental health and social economic conditions and even cultural identities. I will give an example, and my examples will be coming from Nigeria because this is where I'm from and I can only speak from my own lived experience. I will give an example of the civil war between the south of Nigeria, that's the Igbo people, and the north and west, and how because of that, if in Nigeria right now you see, Igbo people are always having houses in their village, or they want to travel abroad, or they are very communal and really stick to their communities, and that's because of the generational trauma and the collective trauma they experienced during the war, and that has shaped their identity, that has shaped their culture right now. So all these things still keep impacting us now, and um also collides with our present trauma to also form something really really big, influencing our community dynamics, our well-being. And I just want to wrap up by saying this just signifies the need for healing and awareness, intergenerationally, because it is not an individual thing. So solutions cannot be individual. And we need to bring in intergenerational perspective to this kind of discussions, because you can't talk about why people are doing particular things without looking at their history and how they were raised, or the environment they were raised, and how they have their relationship with their parents and relational dynamics even with the people in power. So all these things need to come up, and solution just comes from bringing different age groups to talk about these things from different perspectives and see how healing can come from there. Yeah, thank you. I'll just end there.
Thank you so much, Ade and Ayomide. As you're speaking, my mind just keeps on going in different directions of how this wounding of the soul manifests psychosomatically in our realities, intrapersonally and interpersonally, like you were speaking to, how it affects our relationship, how it affects how we show up for each other, how it keeps on manifesting in our system, in our culture. And all of that together is just making me wonder, like from your experience in terms of your personal healing to the community, how do you see all of these dysfunctionalities that the trauma had caused us manifesting in our relationships? I would love for you to share from examples from your work, examples from your own personal, lives, and wherever else that you can bring this example from. I really would love to know. Recently, I'm reading Gabo Mate's book on, I'm trying to remember the title now. It's focused on toxic culture. And
The myth of normal.
Yes, the myth of norma. And thank you. And I'm like, wow, my mind is blown because there's just so much of this spectrum of dysfunctionality, of toxicity, of trauma, and how they keep on showing up in everything we do. So are there specific examples of how you've seen this manifesting in people, in community? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on that, and something that, Ayomide was also touching on is, when Gabor Mate talks about trauma, I love one of the things that he says, where he says, trauma is not about what happens, it's about what happens inside of us as a result of what happens. So trauma is what happens inside of us as a result of what happens. And I really like that definition, because there will be some people who go through those floods, who go through those wars, who go through abuse, who somehow are able to stay grounded in a different way from another person who maybe is just overwhelmed by that. And I think that is really, really important, actually, because when I look at my own history and, my family line, very often there was that focusing on the event. Let's just talk about what happened, as opposed to what was going inside me or inside each other as a result of what happens. And that's why I like that definition that I posted, actually, because it focuses on that multi-level emotional injury. So imagine if all of us on this call right now were part of a family, and we all have our own individual emotional wounding. Coming together starts to form that collective. And that affects us in very different ways. So when it comes to the work that I do, I often talk about healing at 4 different levels. And in fact, I bring this into all the facilitation that I do, regardless of whether it's to do with healing or just to do with personal growth. So the first level that I talk about is at the self level. So what's going on within me? My thoughts, my feelings, the beliefs, my patterns. How has my history shaped how I'm showing up today? So I think back to when I first started my active conscious healing journey. A relationship had ended. And when it ended, I was like, there's some patterns here. There's something so familiar. I need to retrace my steps. And I need to pause and find out how my parents influenced my showing up in relationships. So that's how it started for me, this really awful relationship. So the first one is the self. The second level of healing, which you both touched on, is that relational. Like how am I showing up in relationship with other people? So how am I showing up with you, Moon Goddess, with you, Ayomide, with my partner, with my relationally? The third level is how am I showing up in community? How am I showing up in my organization of work? How am I showing up in my family setting? So that communal. And then the fourth level is the societal. How am I showing up in society? And I think healing really has to happen at each of those levels. So whenever I'm doing my own work, I'm always checking in, like, okay, which is like the vitamins, multivitamins, like where is there a deficiency right now? Am I spending all my time in that relational? Okay, maybe I need to look at the societal. Am I spending all my time in societal? Maybe I need to bring some self in. So I think they all work simultaneously. And I think sometimes what can happen, like when I first started my own healing work, I just did the self stuff. The self. And then I go out into relationships and it's like, this is really, really terrible because I've not done the relational stuff. And then I'm doing the relational stuff. And then when it comes to being in communal settings, it's like, oh my goodness, this is overwhelming. So I think for all of us, it's really important to check in at those 4 levels. What wounds are being activated? What bruises, what scars, and what work do I need to do to confront them at those four levels?
Yeah, I'm listening and I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense, because when I went deeply into my own inner work and healing, and I was thinking, yeah, I got it. I am centering myself. It's better. Then you go out, and of course, we are social beings. We are relational. This our Ubuntu, the interconnectivity of all lives. Then I move into the world. Then I'm traumatized again because you know, you can't be the only one that got this. Everybody has to work together in tandem by doing their own healing work as well at all these levels that you've mentioned. Ayomide, over to you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I totally agree with that sentiment, Monique, because one thing I've come to realize is I can't be fully healed in a sick society, and that's like very hard because, like you said, it doesn't make sense for you to profess you are healed and then you go out and you're in the capitalist system and all these things are still happening. I think like that healing doesn't work. Like it's not holistic healing, right? And one example I even want to bring on, on you asking about us sharing story, I think I want to touch on probably like the history of colonization in Nigeria. And when, all those processes happened, there was already a divide. And because colonization happened because some people wanted resources and they wanted Nigerians money and all of that, um the rules or the laws and everything that we follow still aligns with that profit capitalist extractive kind of culture, which is now pervasive all over in Nigeria. Now, most young people are like, I want to make money. How can I get money quickly? And there's an increase in fraud and all of that. And there is already like this generational divide because of the way authority was seen then in that colonial era. For example, like, my parents were saying authority, even like my grandparents were saying authority has um having dominion over other people because of the way it was um manifested in the society, for example, and they brought it into the family. So when you go to school now, kids are being punished, kids are curiosity, people's curiosity are being killed. You are not asking questions, you are not connecting with your elders as it was in the olden days. I remember, people saying, oh, we used to tales by moonlight. I used to live like my mom lives with her grandmom, and they had all this community which we don't have and which we have been separated from. So I think that also like has brought a lot of um intergenerational gap, which is even staunching the healing that we can have. Like you said, we cannot have individual healing without all these other forms of healing, relational healing and all of that. So yeah, I think that's one thing in present day, how, I think one experience I can share from my lived experience is like how, I've seen that manifest right now, that fear of authority. I remember I used to be very afraid of people in power and I didn't want to speak and I was always scared to ask questions. And, it was like I was caged. And I know a lot of young people right now feel that way. And I remember in one, because we do have climate conversations, and we had one intergenerationally at my work. And when we're sharing this with the elders, we were like, I didn't know young people felt this way. I didn't know if people were scared to ask questions. And at the end of that conversation, the elder actually apologized, like, for failing young people and for failing to, come down to our level and see us as humans and think and be empathetic really to our conditions. And she just realized that because we had that conversation and she was over 60. So imagine somebody who has lived in this world for 6 decades, just realizing that young people also have feelings and they need to be heard and they need to be listened to. So that intergenerational gap has already been formed, and having this kind of spaces for people to just come together so healing can happen, I think is very important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ade, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add some other thoughts that were coming up for me as I was listening to both of you. There's a quote that goes something like, we were wounded in relationship, and so we heal in relationship. We're wounded in community, and so we heal in community as well. And community can bring about loads of trauma, definitely. So as I was listening to Ayomide, one of the things that was coming up for me in terms of my own story as a gay man, is the trauma associated with that. Because in Nigeria, I remember growing up and just feeling this sense of, I can't be myself. You know, I can't. So something that would be just a way of human expression became something traumatic that I just could not own up to. And I know many, you know, LGBTQIA plus Nigerians who decide to deny that part of who they are because of the community. They don't want to shame the family, you know, they don't want to disgrace the family, so they sacrifice their authenticity. So I think there is also a trauma around human expression that comes in. And then religion also plays a part. You know, patriarchy, you know, plays a huge part. Like I think of my mom, you know, my parents came to the UK in the 60s. And when my parents went back to Nigeria, it was in the 70s, when the women in the UK used to wear these hot pants. So they're like the really, really short shorts. And my mother, you know, she was huge feminist at the time. She'd wear hot pants. And we were living with my grandfather, who was devout Muslim. And he'd be like, you can't wear that, you know, that's inappropriate, you need to change. And I saw how my mother, who was this very expressionate person, started to dim her light. I mean, and her light dimmed so much that she became a different person as a result of patriarchy, religion. I'm sure the colonialism that Ayomide was talking about also played a huge part in that. And I think that if we are not engaging in more of these conversations, we really are not helping the system heal. So I think conversations like this are really, really important. We're not just doing it for ourselves, we're doing it for future generations. Because I would love an Africa where people are able to be the fullness of who they are. And I think right now there is a lot that gets in the way of being the fullness of who we are. I mean, that's my hope in all the work that I do. I always say to people, I want to co-create a space where you can step into the fullness of who you are. Because very often, many of us become so fragmented that we start to leave parts of ourselves at the door because we feel those parts are not going to be accepted, or because that trauma is just so overwhelming and we think, this is just too heavy, I can't deal with it, I'm just going to put it to one side. And that is painful.
Very painful indeed. And I was listening to both of you and I was connecting this idea of intergenerational gap and not being the fullness of who we are in every situation as a thing that kind of become normalized over a long period of time. You know, even talk about the baby boomers, you know, generation, which Ade will be in, or me, the Gen X.
I'm not a baby boomer. How dare you?
How
dare you?
You know, because there is a 10-year between the two of us.
I am Gen X, thank you. I'm Gen X, thank you very much.
Yeah, so both of us is still, what do you call it now? Youthful elders in that sense. But like Gen Z, you're the millennial, the alpha. The thing is, this has been a thing that has been in the system for so long. It's just getting worse, you know, because of the lack of awareness, because, you know, the elders weren't seeing the problem in their approach as well, not linking it with the trauma that made them, you know, form a certain way of being. But right now, I think what this space provides for us is to speak up, is to do the healing work of being accountable to ourselves and others. And it is in that collective healing space that we're calling for. Because it's hard. It's hard to be the fullness of who you are in a system that is already telling you you're not enough. Something is wrong with you. I recall a conversation I had with you Ade when this woundedness was activated in me when I went to the Codestria conference in December, and I was all over the place, and you were like, ask yourself what's going on. And I realized that the question, the reason why I was reacting that way was because I felt I, as a person, I am wrong. I am a mistake. I made myself the problem, because that was the upbringing, the childhood of trauma that is replaying itself as an adult. So we have all of that going on within ourselves. But my question now going forward is, with all this awareness that we are creating, is there a way to mitigate all of these traumas, all of these problems in our collective approach to life, in our collective approach to holding each other as one and healing going forward? Is that a way to really mitigate this? Nobody is going to take, please, anybody can jump in. We have two more
okay.
questions.
Okay, Ayomide, why don't you go?
Okay. Yeah. So I think that like I said earlier, the polycrisis is multiple crisis, for multiple areas: climate, economic, and other kind of social disparities that come together and amplify each other. And I feel like collective healing practice is one way that we can help people process both personal and shared traumas. So usually healing is done in silos. Like, you say, okay, you are feeling this kind of way and you are asked to see a psychologist or something. As much as the psychologist will want to help you. For example, as a Nigerian, inflation has like tripled over the past year. So imagine, and that has caused depression and a lot of other mental issues for people. Salaries is not rising, but like cost of living rises every day. And then you tell somebody you are depressed, and they say, "Oh, go to a psychologist." Not really, and you go to a psychologist who is not looking at your environment or your social environment, your economic situation, your finances, and they are just, saying, "Oh, you are depressed because you feel this way," and then they prescribe drugs to you. That kind of healing doesn't work in the long term, really, because the healing that person needs at that time is more of like financial healing, so to speak, or maybe even having better society where they are being heard or listened to. So collective healing is where people can process both, their personal and shared traumas together. And I think the polycrisis is a call for us to come out of these silos and these bubbles that, we've always put ourselves when it comes to healing, and talk about compassionate connection and agency for each generation. And we also include love in our systems. I think collective healing would encourage a wider perspective of ourselves. So you not just think of yourself as one person, but you think of yourself as a collective along with that of the individual. You know that your survival is not just based on you. Your survival is based on your environment, it's based on your community, it's based on the people around you. So when we do less selfishness and more love, I think we can now be vulnerable and people can now actively listen. And I think collective healing is also us coming together to have a shared vision, for the future that we want to see. So that makes it easy for everybody to work towards collective well-being when you have a shared vision of how that works. So, and then this inclusive, because most times when you see intergenerational connections or when young people are invited to gatherings and conversations, it's just because they want to be tokenized and they just want to be like, okay, we have this young person on at the table and they are saying something, but they are opinions are not necessarily included in the solutions that are being put forward. So it should be inclusive and it should be co-created by all age groups. Even children have wisdom. I think that's one thing that we should realize. Children have wisdom. Every age group has wisdom, and all these things should come together, to just develop practices, and it can be ceremonies, it can be workshops, it can be through storytelling, like the work we do at TIP. At first, we use stories to bring stories of elders who are working in climate change and who have had multiple years of climate advocacy experience. and sharing the stories with young people. And from there, we moved on to bringing them into physical spaces and having conversations. And we saw, healing, we saw apology, and we saw validation across all age groups because they had that space and they were able to be vulnerable and share their stories. So just having dialogue, and it could even be environmental projects. I know this professor um that works in the Ibanicom community in, I think, Cameroon. And what they did for intergenerational healing, and this is focused on more on mental health, was to do more cultural projects that had value in their culture, in their traditional context, bringing young people and old people around that. So not just bringing, like, for example, we want to have intergenerational sessions there, but then we bring westernized agendas and say, okay, you guys should do like this or all of that. Like, it doesn't work. I remember when climate cafes and I used to do embodiment practices and breath work. It felt a bit weird, like the people in the room felt a bit weird because it's not really a Nigerian thing to do breath work, as a way, as an embodiment practice or as a grounding practice. But even if I want to go to like basic Nigerian cultures, that is more of even dancing and more of ancestral things, and that is even weirder, if I may say so, because we young people have been disconnected from that kind of community where people can just stand up and start dancing and you don't like, me dancing in public is me feeling shy because I feel like people are judging me and all of that. But when we, listen to our ancestors and how they used to have tales by moonlight and come for dancing practices and all of that, it was easy for them because it was something that they were doing. And those kind of events even encourage healing because you are vulnerable. Like dancing is a vulnerable practice in a way because you are, expressing yourself in that manner. So having these comfortable spaces where things like this can happen intergenerationally, would strengthen community ties. I want to read from my notes now and foster love and allow us to navigate our challenges better with resilience and unity. Thank you.
Thank you. The ancestral healing practices of dancing, of stepping in together for collective healing intentionally, putting the pain elsewhere as we allow it to transform. And to that, I think Miriam Rose was the person who said this, that when we heal ourselves, we heal our ancestors from wounds that run deep in our family. When we heal our ancestors, we heal the world from wounds that run deep in humanity. We are called to do that together. And Ade, over to you. Before I ask the last question for the day, please, people, questions, contributions are welcome at this stage. Yeah. Thank you, Clinton. I'll call you shortly. Ade, please go on.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything that Ayomide shared, actually. Yeah, completely. What I would also add or expand on is it's important that we don't feel that we have to wait until our external life is perfect before we begin our healing work. I'm thinking of Maslow's hierarchy, where very often there used to be people who are like, the food, shelter, safety needs to be sorted out before I can look at things like self-actualization. And apparently Maslow in his later life revisited that work, and the view that he came to was it is possible to be in that space of self-actualization, that space of purpose or meaning, and still not have enough food on the table or not have sufficient shelter. So I think that's also really important that, yes, ideally, we kind of want our baseline to be perfect before we focus on healing our wounds. But I think it's a simultaneous thing. One thing that I've certainly learned from my own journey and the people that I work with is this is lifelong work.
Yes.
It's not something that we do once and it's like over, or we do like for 6 months, I'm going to do my intergenerational stuff, then it's all done and dusted. This is lifelong work. I often use the metaphor of dental hygiene, brushing our teeth, flossing, going to the dentist and all of that. You know, we don't go, okay, I brushed my teeth today. I don't need to brush my teeth for the next 6 months. No, it's a regular thing. And that's the same thing with this healing work, like really checking in. And a big part of it is that connection that Ayomide was talking about, that compassionate connection is so important. Like checking in with the people in our lives, checking in terms of their own inner reality, what's going on for them. Like when I was growing up, no one talked about your inner world. Like inner world, what's that? It's all about the external, you know, your exams and how you're doing externally, what you're wearing, and all of that. There was no curiosity about what's going on internally. And I think that really needs to be normalized much more. Because that's how it really starts. Imagine if I was connecting with 2 or 3 people, and rather than sitting down and talking about the latest show on television or who's wearing what, like we just check in, like, how's your inner world? You know, how's your inner world? I often use this other metaphor of an inner garden. We all have an inner garden, and it's important that we go in and tend to that garden. You know, from time to time, there'll be weeds. We need to pluck out those weeds. We need to prune the flowers. We need to water them. So like just checking in with each other. How's your inner garden this week? What's going on? And I think really normalizing that. And sometimes that becomes really gendered as well. You know, the assumption that I make is women are probably much better at doing that. Maybe not, but I have this assumption that they are. But with men, it's like, what? Men, we don't want to have that kind of conversation. Like I remember when years back when my dad was ill, he was on the verge of his death. And I remember speaking to some friends saying, oh, you know, my dad's ill, I think he might die. And none of them could even have a conversation about it. Like there was just this dead silence. And then I ended up having to go in and just talk. There was just this dead silence. So I think normalizing those conversations are really, really important.
Thank you so much. And I will call Clinton. I just want to say quickly, normalizing that is important. Since vulnerability as strength is an act that we have to cultivate. And I'm grateful that I have that space with you, Ade, where when we give each other calls, we check with each other internally. And the reflection that happens within that space is usually a gift for me to deepen my inner work. I am grateful for that. Thank you for bringing this to light. Clinton, please get ready. And I want to quickly pose the last question for our speakers to ruminate on it before they have the floor back. So I want to know how we can intensify collective healing practices as a community endeavor. How can we do that in our community to be a takeaway point for us today? And please, more people would love to hear from you. Share your healing practices, share what you're doing to mitigate intergenerational and collective healing in your community, in your life, and in your work. Clinton, over to you. Or do I say Cerebron? Yes. Go on.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to contribute based on something that I do with my friends. So first of all, because of the Jackpot wave, a lot of my friends are no longer in the country. So that community I used to have around has been greatly depleted. But still, for the friends that I do have around, because I mean, it's one thing to have virtual calls and all of that, but it's a completely different experience when you get to actually be in the same space with people. So what we do, there's a friend group I have, about 4, 5, 6 of us. We meet up at one person's place. We just come around. Now it's not like we discuss anything particularly about our lives or our issues, even though that comes up along the way. But the idea is just be in the same space to share, to talk about our lives and just generally share with each other, eat. Sometimes we do potlucks, sometimes we just come to watch something together. But every last Sunday of the month, every month we do that. And what I found that it has done for me is that I usually go there very heavy. Whenever I go there, I feel very heavy. I feel so much chaos because there's so much that I'm trying to do with the economy and everything, and just the hustle and bustle of everyday life. But when I go there, and I find that by the time I come back home, I feel a lot lighter. Now, it might not be that we specifically discussed the issues that I was dealing with when I went there, but just the fact that I was in that space, very
Yes.
vulnerable, very free, it did a lot for me, and it even gave me the clarity to actually deal with whatever issues I had that just felt foggy in my head. But just being in that space, being able to be, in Nigeria generally, we like to be very guarded everywhere, because the truth is we don't trust, what we have. We're always very suspicious of something could happen here. So that is not a good way to live. Unfortunately, we have to live like that just to survive sometimes. So, but being able to be in a space where you don't have to have your guard up, you don't have to look behind your back or wonder if someone's trying to harm you or anything like that. You're just free. You're just able to be, and just exist in that space. And that has helped me. We've been doing this now for about 2 years. Fortunately for me, friends have no plans to japa. They want to remain in Nigeria. So there's been no disruption to that. And it has helped me a lot. It's something I've been telling other people to try to do with friends that they have around. Even if it's just 2-3 people, just have a time every month where you can do that. Alternatively, if you can't do something like that, you can maybe just have a day in a month. Maybe it could be a Saturday or a Sunday, where I know that funds are difficult to get right now, but it's still, you have to look at it as an investment also in yourself. Where maybe you just a hotel somewhere, keep everything outside, just go there, have a bath and relax and forget all about life as a whole. You can pick it back up maybe the next day, but just have a night like that where you don't have to think about money, you don't have to think about work, you don't have to think about anything. You can just be in that space and just be with yourself and just, be light and free. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, being light and free. Thank you. It's like you started out answering that question of how we can intensify collective healing practices in our communities. The fact is to make it holistic is what that healing space is for you, especially through this gathering that you talk about. And why I think this kind of gathering is important, if I may, is that many people, because of the lack of these, keep going back to toxic places. Religiosity is an example of that, where like the community it gives you is just that you don't want to be alone, even though that preaching that is happening there, you want to challenge it because it's damaging to your soul. But because of the sense of community, you just want to be there. But now imagine if we are intentionally cultivating that. It speaks to what Karapage said in response to healing justice approach and practice, to say it's not every time that we want to talk about what's bothering us. Sometimes all we want to do is be in a space of support, doing crocheting, dancing together, doing other activities that can behold one another as we allow what we are going through to be transformed. Thank you so much for this. So even though I've posed the last question, Abie had asked some questions here. And okay, Dominica said, thank you for the incredible conversation. I need to jump on the call. Thank you for joining us. We're ending in 20 minutes anyways. And the question that Abie had asked, 2 questions there. What are some promising opportunities for transgenerational and collective healing presently? How can we measure the impact of healing initiatives and ensure their long-term sustainability beyond psychometric measures? So these are the 2 questions. And you can jump on that or continue with the last question of how to intensify collective healing practices in our communities, or just link them up as you wish. Over to you, our speakers. Who goes first?
Well, I'm here. I'll let Ade put the elderly touch after I'm done with my youth perspective. So I think one thing that we can do to really intensify healing process is resources for communities, to be honest, because when people are resourced, and I'm not just talking about financial or monetary resources, I'm even talking about that space for conversations. For example, like right now, because of the whole economic situation, most people don't even rest, so they are unable to have like communal time. Like rest is now very expensive. Usually, I remember when we were growing up, Sundays and Saturdays, my parents would be home, would watch TV together, and just probably conversations would come up from there, watching African Magic Yoruba and just asking questions and all of that. And that is kind of like collective like a gathering really to foster connection in the family. But now we are even beginning to lose spaces like that, all because people are majorly focused on survival, and they don't have spaces to come together. So we need like time resource. I don't know how that can happen, but time resource for people to be able to come together really and have the space. Another thing is even enabling this collaboration by creating spaces where these things can happen. I was speaking to my brother yesterday, and we're like, oh my god, there are a lot of bars that are opened around now. There is no library, no like open field for exercise or anything. Like everything is just bars and places where people can really make money. So there are no, like, imagine if there was like a community park. Definitely an elderly person is going to be there, a young person is going to be there, and you guys can strike up conversations. Like just having that space is even creating a resource for these intergenerational healing processes to start. But when we don't have those resources, it won't happen, or it is really difficult for it to happen. So I think one major thing for me is just resources. And then I think I want to answer the second question where it says, how can we measure the impact of healing initiatives and ensure their long-term sustainability? Um, Apart from beyond psychometric measures, and like the fact that when healing happens, you have more I don't want to use the word whole, but you have better adapted humans in the society really. Like if you know that you have generational support. For example, I remember mentioning earlier that I used to be so scared of speaking to older people, and I used to be very timid and nervous and all of that. But when, I started getting into spaces where I had old people, for example, Moon Goddess, I remember the first ever webinar I hosted, and she just created this welcoming and relaxed space for me, and I was really able to be myself and speak, and she was really accepting of me. And
I am not old people. I'm not old. I'm a youthful elder. I'm a youthful elder, Ayomide.
All right, noted. So youthful elders like Moon Goddess who are accepted, and that has really translated in my life so far. I don't think I can be scared to enter into anybody's office or speak to anybody now. Like, because I see you as human first, even before any other position or title that is attached to your name. And it's because of these spaces that is provided by youthful elders for me to be able to share my thoughts, comfortably. So I think that's a long-term sustainability that comes out from that, like inner transformation, agency, courage, and bravery, both for elders and even young people. I think, and we don't need to maybe think of measurement like it has to be qualitative. Quantitative measurement is also okay because, like we said, people don't talk about inner words, and that's because it cannot be quantified really. But we need to move away from quantity measurements, and measures is enough because it reverberates through life, it reverberates through your physical health also, not just even your mental health. At least speaking from my perspective. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Ade.
Yeah, thank you. Ayomide certainly has an inner elder, inner wise elder. I love the wisdom that you're bringing to this conversation. It's very, very, very rich, actually. Yeah, in terms of the measurement, what comes to mind is each individual will be able to measure because they're showing up differently in their life. Maybe they're not getting triggered, activated in the same way. maybe people are noticing something different about them. So that's one of the ways that that difference will start to show through. And in terms of the promising opportunities, I think this is really exciting time to be alive. You know, social media, for instance, I know people poo-poo it because it has a shadow side, but there's so many resources out there that I often come across around healing modalities, you know, trauma, wounds. So if we sort of look at it from a healing perspective, there's so many opportunities there in terms of resources. There's so many platforms now, podcasts that we can listen to and engage in conversations around what healing means. There's so many books that are coming through around that. I mean, when I was growing up, this type of conversation just never happened. We didn't even have the internet. So it was just so different. So I think technology can certainly play a big part in healing. The other thing that was coming through for me is the role of self-compassion when it comes to healing. I think this is really, really important because it can be so easy to go to self-judgment. You know, so we might go to this place of, you know, I've read the books, I'm doing all the work, and I still have all these wounding, I'm still getting activated. And it's important that we are self-compassionate, really, really important, because a lot of these wounds are deep, like big, big deep. You know, when Clinton was speaking earlier on, Clinton was talking about that sense of guarded and suspiciousness. And it shows up in me. I still have this hypervigilance, like this sense of there's danger. You know, I see a therapist on a regular basis, and I've lost count of the number of times when we've explored guardedness, suspicion, and hypervigilance. And the conclusion that I came to was it's not just a personal trauma, it's like intergenerational, like ancestors. You know, our ancestors had to be guarded because it was not safe. It was not safe at a very real level in terms, I mean, you know, Ayomide was talking about colonization. We've got colonization, we've got slavery, we've got wars, we've got so much was going on across the continent of Africa that is it's in our genes, in our system. You know, these kind of conversations that we're having, our ancestors never even dreamt, could not even dream of having this kind of conversation. Healing? What do you mean healing? For them, it was about survival. Survival is what they were focused on. It wasn't about thriving. It wasn't about abundance. It was about survival. And I think for us, we have the opportunity now to step into thriving and flourishing. And at the same time, there are these wounds that we carry. So I think for me, that self-compassion is really, really important because there are some times where I go to this place of, you know, you're doing all the work, you see a therapist, you know, you're journaling, you're dancing, you're doing all of that, and yet you're still getting triggered and activated. And this is where that self-compassion comes in. And that compassionate connection that Ayomide was talking about goes hand in hand with that. Self-compassion and that compassionate connection is really, really important. If there's something that I want those listening to take away, would be really those two things, cultivating that, because that starts to be a way that we can build that resilience, build that groundedness, that anchoring to not just heal our wounds, but to heal the wounds of those around and for future generations as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask. Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the first question that we can also create these opportunities ourselves, just by, asking the elder to share their story, but not just randomly, of course, but like in, an appropriate space. Like just listening to the story of an elder and looking at their life from their perspective and, having that wisdom. I think, you know, for example, when you think of elders, you just see them as mom, grandmom, teacher. You don't really see them as individuals and people that have their own story and all of that. So also even connecting with that, listening to the story can bring sort of healing. So you can speak to your grandmom, speak to elders around you on an individual level, not putting them on that pedestal as an older person, but like as an individual who is also experiencing it with you, even though they have more years of experience. And that can also bring healing, in a way. So we can also create these opportunities for ourselves.
Thank you so much for that. And in line with creating opportunities for ourselves is curating and curating new ancient spaces where we can step into, like Ayomide was saying, now we don't have, holistic libraries, we don't have, open spaces to just go and be, to express ourselves, to connect. And I think we can intentionally curate those opportunities. I know ABA has something in the pipeline for that as well as ìAfrika. We need to have those spaces that will ground us, that will carry this conversation and practices along, and that will build the kind of community that we want, that is more connected, that is more healed, that is thriving, but not just surviving. Thank you for that. And I think I want to link that to what Ade said about self-compassion and building compassionate connections. I really think they're both important for us to take away from here. Why is it important is that why this is important is we continually do intrapersonal healing, interpersonal healing, and if we continue to move along this way, it helps us rethink how our structures should be and serve us, rethink how our culture should be and serve us. And that way, we will see sustainability in how this transforms to how we treat each other, in how this transforms to the kind of community and society that we now live in. I hope on that note, we remember to practice self-compassion as well as build compassionate connections. Thank you so much, everyone. I don't know if anyone else has something to add or to contribute. We're rounding up in 6 minutes, and I want to give the grant to the speakers to share their last, whatever is the last thing in their mind that they feel to share with us as a take away for us. But before then, anyone else? Okay. All right, yeah. So you can also
I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, thank you for the conversation. I've really, I've enjoyed it. It's been nourishing, actually. And I really hope that those listening will have this conversation with the people in their lives as well, actually, and start to normalize conversations like this, because that can be an amazing starting point for healing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Ade. Ayomide.
Yeah, I'm also
our wise and sage youth. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, my youthful elder. Anyways, I just want to thank you. Yeah, I want to thank you for the opportunity to be in this space and to share, my thoughts around this. Like we mentioned, this kind of spaces are not common, and having this opportunity, I'm really grateful to be here. I think one thing I want people to take away is just like the place of compassion. Like, they have said, not just for yourself, but even holistic compassion, really, and looking at people through the lens of love. I think even can start from that, just looking at people as part of you. We are a collective, and we should, stop the old divide and breaking away and fragmentation. And that will happen by looking at people through the lens of love. So that's a practice that we can keep doing every day. I know it might be hard because generally we are biased and all these things show up, but you just taking into consciousness, is one way to shape the narrative and change the way we think about this thing.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you so much to our collaborators and partners and friends, everybody that made the time to come in today. Your contributions have been invaluable as well, your questions, your reflections. And I just want to say this is just the first out of the 3 webinars that we're setting up to continue these post-HSVP conversations. And we're still going to reach out to you for the next one in November and we'll have the last one in December. And I hope you can join us to continue this conversation. And as we're going away today is to remember what Maya Angelou called us to do, that we should do our best until we know better. And when we know better, that we continue to do better. And we can continue this intrapersonally and interpersonally, giving ourselves the opportunity to thrive as a community. That is our Ubuntu. So I would love to call all of us into sharing this collective mantra as we take a deep breath in, giving ourselves the gratitude of showing up, of being here, of stepping into lifelong healing journey together. Just a moment of connecting with yourself. As you repeat after me, we are enough. We are worthy. We have what it takes to navigate life because we are possible. I would love for us to say it 2 more times. And if you can put on your, unmute yourself so we echo it as a community, it would be nice. We are enough.
We are enough.
We are enough.
We are worthy.
Right.
We are worthy.
We are worthy.
We have what it takes
We have what
We
it
have
takes
what
Have
it
what it
takes
takes
to navigate life
to navigate
to
life.
navigate life
right?
because
Because
we are possible.
Because
We are possible.
Let's say it 1 more time.
we are possible. I am possible.
And when we say this 1 more time, we give ourselves soothing hugs. We are possible.
possible.
We are
we are
possible.
We are
possible.
possible. I am possible. I'm enough.
We
I'm
are what
enough.
We are worthy.
we have what it
I am
takes
worthy.
We have what
I have what it
We have
takes
what it takes to thrive.
because
To thrive
we are possible.
because
we are possible.
I am
Let's
I am
possible.
possible.
in this realization,
Oh,
sway ourselves side to side, soothing hug for ourselves, connecting with ourselves, and wherever we can, plant kisses in our body. Self-love. Because when we love ourselves, it's easier to share that with other people. Thank you so much. Everyone, once you're
Self-love.
ready, you can come back to the room
yeah.
as we say goodbye. Thank you, Ade. Thank you, Ayomide. Thank you, everyone. Have a wholesome afternoon wherever you are and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.